Hello, and welcome back to the No Score Review Show. I'm your host, Nick Green, and today, joining me once again, is Cole Parkinson. Cole, glad to have you back.
Hello. Yeah, let's do it. More Indiana Jones.
We're here to talk more Indiana Jones, specifically The Dial of Destiny, the latest Indiana Jones, and the last Indiana Jones film, at least starring Harrison Ford, that we'll get in his lifetime. Maybe. Yeah, we'll get into that later on. The first bit of this review will be spoiler-free, so worry not. No plot details or anything will be discussed in the first little bit. We'll just go over our general thoughts and kind of our expectations going in. And then we'll put up an explicit warning before we get into our highlights and lowlights. So, Cole, we haven't talked since both of us have seen it. So nope. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on the movie. What did you think? Dial of Destiny.
I thought it was pretty good. I kind of walked out of the theater and kind of felt the same as I did Kingdom of Crystal Skull. I was like, it was pretty good. It didn't stack up to like Raiders and Last Crusade, obviously, but even if you were going into either of those movies and expecting that, I think you were going to walk out disappointed no matter what.
Yeah.
I think the thing that stood out the most is it kind of continued the tradition of like the first 20 minutes are just spectacular. I love the opening train sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was my favorite part of the movie. Like, obviously the de-aging, a little rough sometimes, but most of the time I really didn't notice it.
Yeah.
There wasn't
I would say that aspect of it, the facial technology, I was sold on for the most part.
Yeah.
It was the voice for me that took he sounds like he's 80 years old, so that was a really tough point.
After, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes, I'm just like, I don't know if it was just my brain being like, just enjoy it or whatever it was, but I just kind of tuned it out. I was just like, once you just kind of zone in on his face and just think about that, I could kind of convince myself. But yeah, the first 5 to 10 minutes of that, it was like, it sounds like old Harrison Ford in a young body, but I mean, the face scans were really good. Like, it wasn't nearly as bad as like Mando, like with Luke. That was like
totally
so jarring to watch.
It's probably some of the better facial tech that we've gotten in recent years. It definitely still had some of the like minute facial movements weren't quite there, and like big sweeping action sequences were a little rough. But like a lot of, I mean, especially if you just like take screen grabs and stuff, it looks pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But I think that whole sequence in general, not like getting too spoilery or anything, but the first bit, like the flashback, because I mean, that is in the trailers. The flashback stuff is in like the first bit of the film. And I think all of the other aspects of that sequence were like firing on all cylinders. So I think it didn't take me out of it too much. It was a really great intro. It felt like kind of a third act to a different indie film that we had.
Right? It kind of felt like kind of Last Crusade era. Like that's because it kind of reminded me of like the castle in Last Crusade. Like that's what. So I think that's probably why it hit so well for me. I was just like, wow, this is really good. Like obviously it would have been great if they filmed this 20, 30 years ago and Harrison Ford was actually that age. But I mean, you do what you can, and it does kind of set up the movie. I do think that was probably my favorite part of the movie, though. Like, I don't think anything really came close to being as good as that first, 20, 25 minutes. I don't know exactly how long it is, but that felt like Indiana Jones, and that felt like what I was expecting.
It also actually kind of mirrors the Last Crusade, where we open on a flashback sequence and then go to present day Indy, right? It's an interesting parallel to draw. Just in different time zones, kind of. But yeah, I would agree. Overall, I enjoyed it. I would say my biggest overall takeaway is it's a different feel from the first four films. It's the first film that doesn't have Spielberg at the helm as director. He is a producer, but personally, it didn't feel like he had much hands on the product overall.
No, I think like the first 20-25 minutes was the most I felt like. It felt like an old Indiana Jones movie. I mean, I don't think it was like bad per se. Like I loved a lot of James Mangold movies, so I mean,
Yeah, for
it
sure.
didn't like take away from it, but yeah, there's definitely a different feel, even from like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. There's definitely a different, even tone, I guess, like, but just
Yeah.
a feel, like, just it feels like Indiana Jones, but it feels also, I don't know if
It doesn't feel
refreshing
like
or
a
new.
Spielberg movie. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of feels different compared to the first four. So, I
Totally.
mean,
Yeah,
some
I
people might
think that
like that way more, some might not. It's not.
I
I don't know.
agree.
I don't think you could say it's like way better or way worse than Kingdom of Crystal Skull. Again, I wouldn't compare it to the first three movies just because, again,
Yeah.
it's
Well, especially
it's
not
not in the
like
same.
Last Crusade and Raiders. Like
Yeah,
those are just in a different echelon, I would say.
yeah,
It's definitely more along the same line as like Temple of Doom and Crystal Skull for me.
yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's more of a thing I noticed rather than a setback for me.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Bringing in personal preference, I definitely prefer the like whimsical Spielberg
Hmm.
style and nature of the first three films.
Yeah,
First four films, honestly, because even Crystal
yeah,
Skull nailed it, I would say.
yeah,
But like considering that, and then also Harrison Ford being as old as he is, he's in his
yeah,
80s now. Like that's
yeah,
insane.
yeah,
Uh, Considering those couple factors, I still think they brought it, and I think this is probably, with all of the context surrounding it, it's probably the best version of the film we could have asked for. Like
yeah.
it's not some hollow like nostalgia plagued cash grab. It
No,
feels like
yeah,
like genuine, like a genuine outing. It's maybe not like as triumphant a like finishing film to the series as it maybe could have been, but I don't
yeah,
know how much stronger you could have asked for,
yeah,
especially
exactly.
considering all these facets.
Yeah, I think honestly, if they would have filmed it even, 2 or 3 years after Crystal Skull, I think it would have hit a bit more. Because yeah, there are times where Harrison Ford is showing his age, and I mean, you can't
Yeah,
blame him. Like, he's
no.
80 years old. Like, what do you expect?
Well, and it's not like he's like there begrudgingly, kind of like with
No,
like the Star Wars films. It's like it
yeah,
feels like he's
he
really
wants
putting
to
in
be there. Yeah,
110%. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. And there's one
Um,
scene in particular where I was like, wow, like that's really good. We won't spoil it here because it is kind of a big point, and I'm sure you
right.
have an idea of what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, it's an old Indiana Jones. It's an old Harrison Ford. I mean,
Yeah.
there is. I feel like the movie doesn't really rely on him being an action star as much as it probably would have 10 years ago. Even
Hmm.
Crystal Skull, he's doing a lot of stuff, and in this movie, I
Yeah.
find he's not really like, even when he, like, not really spoiler, he's climbing this kind of cavernous, um, I don't, what was it, like a mine kind of thing, and he even
Right.
references like, I'm old, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I mean, he's not like, don't go into this movie expecting him like using the whip a lot and fighting a lot. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that movie. Like,
Yeah.
expect an old Indiana Jones, and I think you will probably enjoy most of the movie.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I had like when it comes to expectations, ever since they announced another Indiana Jones film, I'm like,
Yeah,
seriously, are we doing this again? Because like
yeah,
I always considered Crystal Skull to be like it was kind of like one of the first like
yep,
legacy sequels almost, right? Like it
yep,
was
yep,
like almost 20 years after Last Crusade and Crystal
yeah,
Skull had finally come out, and
yep,
it was already tackling that like old Indiana Jones story a little bit,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he was in his
So
60s at that point, so I mean, that's still pretty
exactly,
old for
yeah.
an action
It's
star.
wild. So it was very easy to be concerned right out of the gate with that
Yeah,
announcement of this film. So I was just doing my best to kind of hold back any expectations,
yeah,
hold back any negativity, probably more so. It's not
mm,
necessarily that I even went in with any preconceived expectations. It was more just like that negativity of like, because we've gotten countless crap legacy sequels
yeah,
in the last decade or so,
yeah,
um, that are just there for like nostalgia bait and everything. But
yeah.
I think this one definitely doesn't rely on that as much.
No.
Honestly, it feels like at times some of the other films
Yep.
put in more nostalgia, not nostalgia bait, but like played more into that trope a little bit more
Yep.
than this film does. I
Yeah.
think it
I
definitely
even
feels
Crystal
more
Skull, I
sincere.
think it kind of did. I mean, like, we hadn't seen Marion until since Raiders. So I mean, bringing her back after
Yep.
2 other movies kind of felt like that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
There's
we had
callbacks
seen.
to the arc and everything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I mean, this movie there are callbacks, but it's pretty few and far between. Like you don't,
Mm-hmm.
there's not cameo after cameo after
Yep.
cameo of all these old characters. Like, I mean, I don't know
Although
if
it's also hard to do so in
yeah,
with the nature
exactly.
of this film, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it would be very jarring if like just a whole bunch of older Indiana Jones characters came back. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, for the
it would
most
feel
part,
more
it was
akin to I won't spoil the film or anything, but
yeah,
a film that came out recently. There are like resurrected actors reprising
yeah,
their roles, and it's just CGI after CGI, and it's not great. So glad
yeah,
they didn't go that route for sure.
yeah. No,
Um, but yeah, I would say overall, I still really enjoyed it. It's definitely doesn't quite capture the energy or the
no,
spirit of the first four films. But I
and
think
it's
considering
one
that,
one thing I did walk out and I was like, that was probably the least funny Indiana Jones movie. I think I laughed once or twice and that was it.
yeah,
It
yeah, I would
was
say so.
not, yeah, there weren't many laughs.
Hmm.
Not that, I mean, that's not really what Indiana Jones is about, but there is a lightheartedness that I
Yeah,
felt was really missing a lot in the movie.
yeah, it
And
definitely plays into that like old legacy characters kind of like
yeah,
miserable trope a little bit.
yeah,
But I mean, the flip side of that is Indy and Harrison Ford get a couple like really well acted and
hmm,
well written scenes where
yeah,
it's like there's some emotional weight there that I don't think has been in the previous films, which is really cool.
yeah. Probably
Um,
not since Last Crusade, like the father um, dynamic
mhm,
in Crystal Skull is there, but I mean it's not really there at the same time.
mhm.
Like you don't even know he's his son until the end. So there
Yeah,
wasn't a whole lot of like emotional scenes in that movie. Last
yeah.
Crusade, obviously you get, Sean Connery and Harrison Ford kind of doing that emotional work in that one. So I mean
Mhm.
it's been a while since we've had kind of really emotional scenes, and obviously there's one in this one where it was like, oh shit, okay,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, I think Harrison Ford knocked it out of the park. I mean, he's 80, so if you're expecting him to act like a
Yeah.
30-year-old, it's not going to happen.
Well, and I mean, it was also just a great showcase of
Yep.
like he's still a fantastic actor. Like
Oh
he's
yeah.
not just this actor who takes these like adventure action roles, right?
Yeah.
Like he's got some range, and he
Yeah.
definitely is able to showcase it a little bit, which was a welcome surprise for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I would say I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point.
Yeah.
Contextually, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I would say it sticks the landing for what it is, and it's a decent like finale to the series
Yeah.
overall. So if you were
Yeah. I'd say
worried, I
it's
would
like
say,
I'd
yeah,
say it's like maybe a touch better than Crystal Skull. Some people
yeah,
may feel the exact opposite. They might like Crystal Skull a bit better. But I mean, they're both very similar in terms of, tone and
hmm,
just kind of an older Indiana Jones. So,
right,
I mean, if you hated Crystal Skull, I don't necessarily know you'll love this movie either, but
yeah. I
I
mean,
would
I
still
have
say
seen
like,
people who hated Crystal Skull
yeah.
love this film, so
Yep.
like
Yep.
you might fall into that camp as well. But like for me, especially when we did our franchise and review, it was
Yep.
more like Crystal Skull and Temple of Doom were kind of on par with each other, and I think Dial of Destiny is close to that, maybe like slightly above for
Yep.
different reasons and whatnot. But yeah,
Yep.
overall recommendation for me, I would say.
Yep.
And yeah, that I think is where we'll wrap up the spoiler-free review. So if you do not want to know any plot details about Dial of Destiny or likely any of the other Indiana Jones films that we haven't spoiled already at this point,
Yeah.
then pause this review now, go check out the film, and come on back to find out our highlights and lowlights for Dial of Destiny. So let's get back to that intro sequence,
Yep.
Cole. Um, I mean, this isn't really spoiler stuff necessarily, but like uh it's just a thought I had when we were talking about it is like I wonder if they, cuz with this like facial technology and stuff,
Yep.
it feels like they're really like a lot of the times it's like they're pursuing that and they're making that their top priority of like, okay, we're going to bring this character back, we're going to de-age them, and that's how we're going to do this. Whereas it feels like a lot of the times you could potentially try and get a little bit more creative with that restriction of like moving the camera to different angles and like playing with depth of field and like out of focus stuff and like action sequences, like really leaning into the stunt double of it all, right? It feels like there are opportunities where you don't have to lean on that facial technology as much,
Yep.
because it feels like at times it could be more of a hindrance than a help if
Yeah.
you're really trying to be like, oh, we want to make sure people can see it's young Indy
Yeah.
swinging from his like whip, right?
Yeah.
um but like I feel like, because like even the way they set up the whole sequence is like he has a bag on his head when we get introduced, right?
Yeah.
Like you could have maybe utilized that a little bit more, and like you could have cheated a couple like lines from past movies of his too, right? I
Yeah.
mean that would require a lot of work for sure, just like scrubbing through his entire filmography
Yeah.
and everything. But yeah, it's just an interesting like thing I noticed with like this film and like some of the other films and TV shows that have
Yeah.
pursued this tech is like I wonder how much effort was actually put into trying to not lean on that tech as much.
Yeah.
But that said, I really, really enjoyed that intro sequence. It has some great like moments. I love like the snarky look he gives like Voller, whatever
Yeah.
Mads Mikkelsen's character is, when
Yeah.
he is like, "Who are you?" and he punches him in the
Yeah.
face.
Puts the hat over his face,
Yeah,
punches
yeah.
him. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I loved the whole train set piece. That was
Yeah.
fantastic. Like the turret gun, like mowing through the other train cars was really
Yeah.
awesome. The like planes flying overhead was really cool. I
Yeah.
love the like setup of like Indy going from train car to train car, and it's like, oh shit, he just keeps running into more Nazis, man.
More and
It's like,
more Nazis. Yeah.
yeah, I love that so much.
Yeah.
It was a great
They
setup.
perfect. They knocked it out of the park once again. Like, just the entire like you're hanging onto your seat the entire time.
Yeah.
Like you said, him going through train car, train car, train car, and just filled with Nazis, and he has to try and figure out how to get out of it is so
Hmm.
good.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and like
yeah,
I know we mentioned that it's not as funny as like some of the other films, but like some of the
yeah,
comedic moments were great. Like just remembering,
yep,
like when he goes into the one train car with the spear or whatever, and the
yeah,
two guards, and he doesn't say a word, and
yeah,
they're like trying to talk to him, and he's like pretending to be a higher up officer and like
yep,
giving them shit for drinking alcohol, and then he just picks up
yeah,
the spear and walks away. That's fantastic, and that shows the bullet hole on his jacket. That was
yeah.
great.
And then they know, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the noose sequence in concept was good. The execution of it
mm.
was a little iffy for me, but
I
it
think
felt
that's where I
straight out of,
noticed
yeah,
the face scan on that one was, I think, the roughest part. You could definitely tell it
yeah,
was not, and a young
totally,
Indy was definitely superimposed on a different person's body.
yeah,
But yeah,
for
I
sure,
mean, again, you gotta, as soon as you see young Indy, right when they take the bag off, you basically have to suspend some disbelief because you know it's
yeah,
not going to be perfect. So I mean,
hmm
but yeah, I mean, from start to finish, that entire sequence is so good. Like it
hmm
sets up the movie really well. Sets up the MacGuffin that we're gonna see throughout the movie. Kind of see what is the whole key of the entire plot.
hmm
Um,
It sets
get
up
to
great
see,
motivation for the antagonist too, of
yeah,
like seeing how he interprets the Nazi reign and how they keep
yeah,
falling short of like the spear is a fake, right? And
yeah,
everything. And it's like he's like, no, this is the true thing we should be going after. And they're like,
yeah.
he's just getting ignored the whole time. That sets up a great beat for his motivations throughout the film, which is really cool.
And they de-aged Mads Mikkelsen too, and I really didn't notice. Like he obviously looks younger, but every time he was on screen, I didn't notice
Yeah.
anything too out of whack. Like it looked really good for him. I mean, they obviously had to do way less de-aging, so I mean, it
Yeah,
probably
well,
helped.
and I
But
wonder too how much of it was makeup versus
yeah,
de-aging, because like,
probably a bit of both.
yeah, like
Yeah,
I imagine most of it there reaches a certain point with some actors in their
yeah,
aging that it's like only so much makeup can be put on them to like fix that, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, that was a great intro sequence.
And how Valeris, he survives after getting absolutely destroyed on the train, like
how?
that might be
and he has no like
nothing,
scars or anything.
He's
like
just
he
fine.
took that well, man.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he would have died. So I mean,
absolutely.
I was reading yesterday, and some people were theorizing like it would have been a cool idea if that was like part of the entire plot was like he had already time traveled and he died at that moment and he time travels like he's already got that figured out. That would have been cool because there was when he hit that I'm like, I know they're not killing him off, but that's like holy shit. So that was
and I was expecting
I
was expecting kind of a Skyfall James Bond thing where he like takes out his like half his face because he got so fucked up in that part.
But no, he's fine. He's just had to recover a little bit and then he's back. So that was
he's as photogenic as ever, that Mads Mikkelsen.
A little bit grayer, but that was it. That's time heals all wounds. Including getting absolutely destroyed.
That was a great sequence. It felt straight out of a indie movie of like prime Harrison Ford era. Moving on to the present day stuff. I liked the setup of Andy being in like the space age and like getting shunned. Like it's like in a weird way, kind of a parallel to like Toy Story, where it's like the cowboy era is getting overridden by the space era. That was a great moment in his class where like no one gives a shit about what he's talking about.
Which is like a great callback to Raiders, where like everybody is just like completely focused on him, especially the girls.
Well, and in Last Crusade too, when he walks into his office and it's just a mob, and he like has to climb out through his window too.
And here they're just like, I don't give a fuck what you're saying.
It's like a third filled like auditorium. And then they bring in that TV on the stand, right? And then everyone's all
is like, paying attention.
That was a great moment. It's a different feel for sure. It definitely plays into that kind of more like somber, melancholic tone that the film has, of like the old miserable protagonist, right?
He feels out of place in his space and time where he is now compared to where he was, in the 30s, like 60s now. He's
the chase sequence through the parade was decent. I would say it's probably one of the weaker or less notable set pieces in the film. There's definitely been much better chase sequences. Like I honestly prefer the chase sequences in Crystal Skull probably over that one. It was really cool from like a practical standpoint, just having all of that there, and we get a little bit more of horseback indie, which was really great.
Of course.
The whole sequence through the subway system was really good too.
Very good.
Trains quicker.
That was one of the times I definitely laughed. That was pretty good. I agree. I don't think it's, again, coming off the train sequence in the intro, it's definitely not nearly as big of a thrill ride. But I mean,
it's a first
it gets the job done,
piece, right? It's a good setup for Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character. I think her name was Helena.
Helena Shaw, and the kind of the sidekick villains that are working with Valer. So it kind of gets a good introduction to kind of the characters you're going to see over the next 2 hours. So I mean, it does the job.
I watched a in-depth review for this film yesterday, I think, and they pointed out something I would have to probably agree with is some of the like first act setup. There's a couple things that are a little like unresolved, I would say, like the whole Indy being framed for murder plot point was kind of just like tossed away and didn't really need to be set up. I don't think it was like needless stakes, I felt like. And it felt pretty inorganic because, like, I mean, he was there, but like, I don't know.
So were a whole bunch of other teachers. Why would he be the only one that would be wanted?
Yeah.
I felt the same way. I was like, very odd, and then it's just kind of goes unresolved. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, it wasn't a huge plot point, so why even include it at that point?
Yeah, it felt like very much like they put a lot of weight into that plot point being the driving force for getting him out of America, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a bit of a weak point. And then also just like the whole CIA working with the like Voeller's team and everything was a little odd. And then that CIA agent just kind of gets offed. That felt a little weird and just unnecessary for me as well. Like, I would have preferred like them keep that character around and have her kind of like switch side. That's kind of where I thought it was going to go eventually. Is her like switch sides and help Indy eventually.
Yeah. And instead, she just gets killed just almost immediately, and then really that entire plot point is just never touched on again. So
totally,
very weird kind of narrative that they put into the first act that doesn't really connect with anything else. It doesn't connect with the intro. It doesn't really connect with the second act or the third. Obviously, the dial is huge in that aspect because I mean that sets it all up, but the whole CIA murdering people and then just completely going off the rails is kind of an odd choice.
Yeah, I would have to agree. But once we get past that, once we leave America, well, actually, before that, I did appreciate seeing John Rhys Davies again.
Yep,
that was a good moment. Another actually pretty decent comedic moment too, where it's like the cheesy line, but he almost gets Indy killed in the middle of the street.
Yeah,
that was very good.
Yeah,
and it was a nice sentimental moment between them two of like Sala being like, "Take me with you. I want to go on your adventure again." Right?
I totally thought he would just show up somewhere later in the film, not like right at the end. I thought for sure he would just show up to help at some point. So I was a little surprised that he didn't just jump on a plane anyways. But
yeah, it was great seeing him again. I loved, as minor a role as it was, Davies brought it, and it was.
But I mean, that's really the only cameo other than Marion at the end. So I mean, those are kind of the two big ones, and that's the only thing we really get. Obviously, no short round or Willie or anything like that. But
like no Mutt either. They decided to kill his character off. That was I will get to that in a little bit, but even seeing, you can see his like picture frame on the wall when we are in Indy's apartment, and I was like, okay, because I wasn't quite sure if they were just going to kind of retcon the whole thing.
I was curious too what they were going to do. I thought maybe they were going to like send him off to be like, I guess they kind of did send him off, but in a different way than I thought. I thought he was going to kind of do the archaeology kind of thing too and be off on his own adventure, was what I was kind of expecting. But I mean, they went in a completely different direction, which is fine because I mean, even if you do set him up as like an archaeologist adventurer, I mean, it might not feel super organic because I mean we already know Shia LaBeouf is not coming back, so having another person out there, including Helena Shaw, who's doing the exact same thing, might be a little weird. So
but that the moment with Sala was great, and then I believe we get to Tangier is where Indy goes to track down Helena.
Who steals the dial from him in kind of just like a shitty way.
That was a cool turn. I mean, we see it in the trailer, so you kind of had it coming, but having her be a little more like scheming and like more of like anti-hero territory, like being in opposition to Indy off the bat was a really cool turn. And it's not just a carbon copy. It's different from like the Mutt dynamic as well too, which was really nice. It could have just fallen into that like young archaeologist with old archaeologist like dynamic that we've already seen. But it was, I think, a refreshing take, and I really liked Phoebe's portrayal of Helena. I think she was written relatively well. I liked the whole black market auction sequence. That was really good. And bringing in Voller and all them. That was like, they had some good lines back and forth with Indy as well. Like, you should have stayed out of Poland. That was a really good moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole, and then like going from the auction sequence into
Sorry, one more thing about the auction sequence. I love when he like pulls out the whip and everyone pulls out a gun.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah. It worked. That worked really well, I thought, in the actual context of the film. So then the chase throughout Tangier was really cool. That felt, I thought it felt like a bit of a snake eating its own tail situation, because like it felt straight out of Uncharted 4 for me. And Uncharted is inspired directly by Indiana Jones. So it's like, oh, the cycle's complete kind of thing.
Great. I love that chase sequence. It was entertaining to see like 3 kind of chases all at once. Like
they introduced that other character of Helena's like ex-fiance. That introduced a great dynamic throughout the whole chase, which was really cool, because you don't have just this one-on-one type.
Well, even then, I guess it's kind of 4, because Helena doesn't really want to be with Indy at that point either. So like her and Teddy are kind of being like, get out of here, dude. I don't need your help. And he's like, no, we're doing this. So, I mean, it was an interesting chase, because there's so many moving parts that, I mean, no one really wins in the end, because everybody kind of gets forced into one area. And then, it's definitely an improvement on the horse chase in the parade.
Yeah, I would agree. Some of the like visual effects with it felt a little bit shoddy at times, but the energy of the scene overall, I think, was really well executed. So then after that, moving along, they lose the dial, so they have to go find the other half. But then they find out they have to find that tablet, which will direct them to the other half of the dial first. So then they go meet Antonio Banderas in, is it in Sicily where they go next?
I can't remember exactly where, but it's somewhere around there.
Italy. In Italy. They go there. I was actually
Greece.
Expecting
sorry. Greece.
Okay. I was half expecting, because when Indy mentions his friend with a boat, I was expecting the black captain from Raiders. I was like, are we gonna see him again?
I also was like, who are you talking about? Because the way he made it sound, again, with these kind of movies, you expect to see a familiar face.
Totally.
So like just seeing Antonio Banderas, it was just like, okay, cool.
I
guess he would know lots of people.
Yeah, exactly. Antonio Banderas was a nice surprise. It's super small role, but he was great. I would actually probably say this might be the weakest set piece for me, because I still think the chase in Act 1 through the city is pretty good, but this whole sequence felt like it could have used a different framing potentially. Because it very much just felt like they're going into the ocean, they're going down, they got to grab the tablet and then get back up. It kicks into gear once they're back up on deck, and like Voller is there and has trapped them on the boat and everything. And that whole like dialogue sequence with Helena like tricking them and everything, I really liked that part. But the actual underwater bit didn't quite work for me overall, especially because there was no dialogue or anything. And I mean, you can't really have dialogue underwater at that time. So like it made sense, but it also was just like, okay, we're just kind of like humdrumming along until they get the sequence. The eel setup was like promising. It was cool, but I don't think the execution quite worked for me overall.
No, it's not something I would ever be like, oh, you got to watch this movie because of this sequence. Like it was very, I did like Indy with like talking about the eels. He says they look like snakes, and he's like,
no, they don't.
No, they don't.
That was
good.
Setup
but
of that whole sequence was good, but
and even then, I was kind of like, if they already knew half the ship was like docked at this like up above a bit, and then the other half was down below. Like, why wouldn't they know that? Like, why wouldn't they have explored more? Like, when they get down to that half that's on like the bank, like they look down and can see the other half. So like, if somebody had already been there, how did they not know it was there? That was one thing I was like, that's a little weird, but whatever.
Yeah. Once they get back up to the surface is where it kicks into high gear. I loved that whole guessing game that she plays with all the henchmen and everything. That was really good. It was a fun little dynamic too of like she cuts a deal with Voller to help him, and
then he pays her immediately, which was kind of surprising.
And then but then they kind of have a rapport where he's answering questions. He's like, yeah, I know that. He's like very happy with himself for answering the questions correctly. That was a good moment. And then she throws the dynamite, which was a really great explosive end to the scene. I love that moment as well. And then we kind of move on to, I think this is where we go to Sicily for the ear of Dionysus or something, I think is what it's called. That was
again. I guess I just want to touch on her plan because she gives them the wrong city, right? And it's to the east, and then they immediately go to the west. So he's like, they're not going there. So I mean, her plan didn't really work either. That was another point. I was like, okay, I guess. I mean, you bought yourself like 20 minutes, maybe an hour if it took them forever to get out. But the plan wasn't exactly the best.
Yeah. Well, she could have maybe timed that a little better with the dynamite throw, like because she throws it and then it's just sitting there, and they're able to kick it away and everything.
Down,
And he could have maybe give her a tap or something when it was closer. But still overall, I liked it. When they're in Sicily, the separating of Teddy felt a little weird to me. He just kind of like goes and fucks off on his own.
His hat.
That was weird.
I'm going to steal you from you and grab some
ice cream,
some ice cream,
or gelato or whatever.
Gelato,
that was a little odd, but once they actually get into the cave sequence, that was really good. That also felt like titular Indiana Jones, especially when they get into that was it methane room with the pool? That felt awesome. Like Indy's solving riddles and everything again. That felt really cool. The bug sequence was awful. I mean, it was good, but I hated it.
But it was kind of a throwaway. Like there's a bunch of bugs, they're all over them, and then they immediately brush them off and just walk away. It's
pretty inconsequential. Yeah, for sure. Then what happens next? We kind of follow Teddy as well. He disposes of the big henchman pretty brutally. He handcuffs him to the grate.
Just straight up murders him.
That was brutal. And then we get into the grave of Archimedes, I think, right? And then we find out, or like Voller puts together the dial, and we then get sent off to the like airfield where they're gonna finally enact the plan. That was a great moment. The Indy getting shot in the grave too, that was actually kind of surprising as well.
Again.
What is it, 10? That's 10 times now because he says 9. That whole sequence. So okay, the sequence where Helena like chases down the plane on a motorcycle in like torrential downpour, with no like visor or helmet or anything, and she jumps on to the wheel and doesn't slip.
She's good.
I don't know. That felt a little bit pushing the boundary for me of like believability, because like.
But I mean, at this point, like Indiana Jones is just not believable. I mean,
that's true.
I mean, you just gotta from the first movie, you have to suspend your disbelief because
Indy himself has fallen out of a plane at like like 3,000 feet or whatever into a river with
I mean, he
no
survived an atomic
scratches.
bomb. I
He
mean,
survives an atomic bomb. Yeah, yeah. So it's probably about in line with the rest of the series.
yeah,
But just something I noticed, of like, my God, because like I mean, to bring it to me personally anyway, I've like biked home in a like shit storm of a like rainstorm,
yeah,
and you cannot
it's not
see
easy.
shit. It is
Yeah,
not easy. So, well, I mean, I guess that just speaks to Helena's ability, but
yeah,
yeah, that that was a funny moment for me. Um, and then yeah, that whole plane sequence. I love when she pulls the like evacuation lever and
yeah,
almost disposes of all the Nazis in the
yeah.
plane. That was
So
good.
good.
Um, Harrison Ford has another great line too, where he is talking to Voller of like, "You're a German, don't try to be funny."
And we did skip over the Mutt when he's talking about Mutt and what happened to him
Oh
too
yeah,
back
we
in Greece,
completely
right?
forgot about
Yeah,
that. Thank you so much for bringing
no
that
worries.
back, because that was actually one of my
Yeah,
highlights of the film.
yeah, me too.
Is he gets like a really good emotional beat where he gets to
Yeah,
talk about, because like Helena asks him about what he would do if he could go back in time, and he
yeah,
like delivers a heavy answer of like telling his son not to go to war because he's gonna die.
yeah.
That
And then he
was
does.
that was heavy, and that was like some grade A acting from Harrison
Yeah.
Ford. Just a
Some of the
great,
criticism I've seen of the movie is people didn't like that Indy's kind of bitter and, you know,
yeah,
old man, but I mean, they give a perfect explanation why he is. Like, he
yeah, for
lost his
sure,
son, and then they immediately are going to get divorced because of it. So I
yeah,
mean, how could he be a happy, 70-year-old or
for
whatever age
sure,
he's in this movie, right? When
yeah,
he literally explains why he's not happy and why he's kind of living a disenchanted life because
yeah,
he's seen some shit that he didn't, wasn't prepared for.
totally. I would say it probably comes down more to personal preference with
Mm.
that, because like I could totally sympathize with wanting a more um like whimsical and wondrous take and tone
Yep.
for the film, of like, he might be old, but he really wants that sense of adventure one last time type of
Yeah.
thing, right? And not leaning as much on that like miserable old protagonist.
Yeah.
um but I think, again, considering how they did it, I think it was executed very well.
Yeah.
And there was like, it was some great writing for that moment and some great like line delivery and acting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It like I said, probably just boils down more to personal preference.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's more believable that, he's in his mid to late 70s. Like, why would he want to keep going out there?
Sure.
Even if Mutt was still alive, I like he's kind of dragged into it, but for me,
Hmm.
I kind of like the idea that he's wanting to not do it anymore. Like, he's
Hmm.
done it for so long. At
Right.
some point, he's got to quit. Like,
Hmm.
I know everybody, well, I guess not everybody, but lots of people wanted him to come back and be like, "Let's do this one more time,
Sure.
last ride." Fast
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Furious, we're family. One last ride together.
Yeah.
To me, it's just like, I don't know. I'd rather see an Indiana Jones where he's kind of forced into it instead of wanting to do it as a 70-year-old. Like,
Sure.
I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think for me, it could go either way, really.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, it definitely falls in line with the character of Indy, and just like the meta nature of Harrison Ford being old as well,
Yeah.
right? I saw a really funny parallel drawn, where it's kind of a, I don't want to call it a straight ripoff, but like it is pretty damn close to another Harrison Ford character's arc in Han Solo with Force
Yeah.
Awakens, where he loses his son, so he pushes away his wife.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty funny when you line those two things up together.
Yeah.
I definitely think Dial of Destiny did it way better.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny that two Harrison Ford characters kind of have that same through line.
Yeah. Same kind of
Um,
end of the road arc.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite
Yeah.
moments of the film for
It's
sure.
it's that and the intro for me. Just being able to see Harrison Ford kind of deliver an emotional line as Indiana Jones, where we haven't really
Hmm.
seen it in so long,
Yeah,
was really cool.
Well, and even like to a lesser extent, and still kind of in that sequence, when he delivers that line when Helena and him and Teddy escape on the boat, and Helena's like
Yeah.
all giddy that they managed to escape, and he's
Yeah.
like, "My friend just died." Like
Yeah.
that was heavy too. It was like
Yeah.
he's like showing Helena that it's not like all sunshine and rainbows with this
Yeah.
adventure thing, right? Like he's
Which I think is probably a good parallel, because I think Indiana Jones probably would have, if he was in the other side and he was Helena in that situation, he probably would have felt the same way back in
sure.
the 30s, right? So I mean, it just
Yeah.
shows that he's,
Or
he's
he would
old and
probably
he's
he
seen
might
some
have
shit.
delivered it, yeah, he might have delivered it more in line of like that grizzled manly man type thing
Yeah.
of like, just shake it off, right?
Yeah,
Type of
exactly.
thing. um yeah, those were some great moments and some great acting work from Ford. um Jumping back to where we were with getting
Yeah.
close to the end of the film in the final act, it that was a nice little twist of the continental drift,
Yeah.
with right before they go into the fissure, and Voller like panics at the last moment. Is like,
Yeah.
"Don't do it! Don't do it!"
Yeah.
That was a great moment.
And then they like premature celebrate and they're like, we did it, we did it. And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
no, you didn't.
Yeah, and then they find out they're in the war, or the like battle of
Syracuse.
Syracuse. Yeah, that was a really good moment. It's got some brutal stuff happening too, like the harpoons coming in and impaling the Nazis and everything.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
The one henchman dude with the mustache just losing his shit and like firing his pistol and like grabbing
Yeah.
the machine gun and stuff.
Gun.
That
Yeah.
was funny. Um, and yeah, that whole moment once they like finally land Indy and Helena out of the plane,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say they got me, man. They got me with that moment at the end. Like I totally ate it up and thought they were gonna be like, okay, Indy's just gonna become part
Yeah.
of history.
Yeah. I
And
thought for
like,
sure they would. And then when she knocks him out, I was like, that is such a great way to do it.
yeah, and the whole theater like erupted with laughter, and I was like
Yeah.
this like crying mess. I'm like, it's so funny, but
Yeah.
like, oh god, he almost left us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm, I'm glad they did the way they did, because if they would have just left him there, that would just, I don't know if I would have liked that end for Indiana Jones. It just
yeah,
would have felt
it.
very weird, but
Mhm.
they set it up perfectly and they nailed it. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it feels like the easy route, kind of how with like Guardians 3 felt a little bit of like killing off your characters to the end of their story type of thing
yeah,
feels like the easy way to go. And like even just from like a actual logistical objective standpoint, like he
yeah,
shouldn't be left
mm,
there because like he's going to alter the course of history. So like
yeah,
that feels very antithetical to the character of
yeah,
Indiana Jones. So
yeah.
I
Which
love
I mean,
that.
Helena
Like,
points out, like, we can't leave you there because you would change everything. Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
exactly.
not a good idea.
Yeah. But yeah, I really appreciated that kind of like swap of like, because Indy is like uh, correcting Helena throughout the film of like
Yeah,
not to be so loose and like happenstance with like these adventures and everything, and providing a little bit more real world to the whole thing to keep her in check. And then she kind of like flips it on him at the end as well, where he's like, I in the review I watched yesterday, they were talking about how like in other Indiana Jones films, he's like almost lost sight of like the situation because he doesn't want to destroy history with like the Ark and the
yeah,
RPG and everything, or
yeah,
like trying to grab the Grail.
yeah,
He's like had those moments of weakness where he like wants to preserve that history or like
yeah,
wants to be in service of the history, but um, yeah, I thought that was a really great moment. I was a bumbling mess in that sequence, but yeah, I really liked the direction they took with it. They and the ending to the film was really nice too. That was like
yep,
almost like it was kind of reminiscent of Endgame with Steve Rogers and Peggy at the
yeah,
end, right? The
yeah.
like really
Very
nice
similar. Yep,
romantic, yeah. Um, and getting Marion at the very end
yep,
was a nice surprise as well. And I would say, for me personally at least, one of the better uses of uh, like legacy dialogue or like a nostalgic moment where they do the like it hurts here moment. That was
from
really
Raiders,
great. It had
was
heart
awesome.
behind it and everything, right?
Yeah,
it wasn't just a hollow thing.
Exactly, it felt very natural and a great way to close these characters off from like a pretty significant moment from like arguably the biggest movie of the franchise. So I mean,
totally.
Yeah, super cool to see her again and have a callback to Raiders that
that
worked
actually meant
perfectly, right?
something. And
Exactly.
worked for the context of the film and everything. That was really well done. I really appreciate it. And it just goes to show as well, like the rapport like Harrison Ford and Karen Allen have with each other. It's like they've known these characters for so long. They know each other as actors, right? It's like they just fell right back into that dynamic, which was really nice to see. And then we get that little, I don't know how much of a big deal I want to make out of that, but like we get that little hat snatch at the end.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what
Yeah,
does that mean
I had
exactly?
no idea what they're going for there.
Like,
'Cause I thought it was just gonna blow away in the wind. Like that's what I was
or
expecting.
it was
Kind of
just gonna
like
stay there,
sit
right?
there.
And it was
Yeah.
like very nice, like bittersweet end of like he's hung his hat, right? And we close to
Yeah.
black. But
No.
no, it's I don't know. I guess maybe they didn't want to end on like a more somber note
Yeah.
of like the ending of the franchise.
Yeah.
That's just more symbolic of like Indy will be back in some capacity. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, eventually it's gonna get rebooted, but I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see another way they could bring old Indiana Jones back unless it's like a
Yeah.
mentor role. Like if they want to do a Helena Shaw movie, then maybe it would make sense. But like
Yeah.
having
I
him,
would be very surprised unless they like recast or something. Like if they do a Helena Shaw movie and Phoebe Waller-Bridge is doing Tomb Raider at the same time, like that seems
a
crazy.
little excessive. Yeah.
Yeah, a little excessive. I mean, like, I really liked Helena. So I mean, like, but knowing the context of Phoebe Waller-Bridge coming in for a Tomb Raider movie, it's like interesting. I don't know if that's gonna be possible, or it's just
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of Phoebe Waller-Bridge in ancient temples and
Yeah.
treasure hunting and everything.
Yeah. Then she'll be in the next Uncharted movie too. Make it a
Yeah.
trifecta.
Yeah. She's gonna be Natalie Drake
Yeah.
in the rebooted Uncharted movie. Cool. Yeah, that's I guess where we kind of didn't we kind of did more of a play by play with this review. We didn't have. I mean, we nailed most of our highlights and lowlights, I would say. Um, and yeah, I overall, like I said, it was good. I think they probably, like I said in the spoiler free part, I think this is probably as good as it was ever going to get with a
Yep.
fifth entry in this franchise this late into the franchise's
Yeah.
like age. Um, so I think they succeeded on that front. I don't think it's gonna be for everybody. Like I'm
No.
sure people are gonna be disappointed with the tone, like we kind of talked about. It's not as like whimsical. I mean, even we both pointed out the fact that it's not really in line with the Spielberg style or anything, obviously. So that'll probably rub some people the wrong way. The whole like negative indie take will probably not sit well with people. But yeah, overall, personally, I think they stuck the landing. Um, and I imagine I'll probably like rewatch this because like even like just rereading some of like the synopsis and like reading other people's reviews and takes and watching people's reviews on this movie, it feels like something kind of in the same vein as Crystal Skull of like something I'll actually give a rewatch in
Yeah.
the future, like nowhere near as frequently as like the high highs
No.
of Last Crusade and Raiders, but like it like and I feel like it also could very well be something that resonates more with us as we get older and kind
Yeah.
of grow closer to that age where Indy is in his later
Yeah.
years. So it could ring stronger in that sense
Yeah.
as it gains it gets up there in age. Good lord.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, do you have any other kind of notes you wanted to
No, I
touch
think you
on?
nailed it. Just saying, like, yeah, it's one of those movies I'd like to rewatch, and then I think I'd have maybe a better grasp on it. But for the most part, it was a good movie. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Again, does it reach the highs of Raiders and Last Crusade? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Is it on par with or not Last Crusade, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Temple of Doom? I think it's right there. Um, you know, give or take, I think it would
Yeah.
be maybe my fourth favorite. I think I'd put it just a little bit above Crystal Skull and maybe just a little bit below Temple of Doom. But
Mm-hmm.
that could change in months and years. Who knows? I don't
For
think
sure.
it sticks out as like a poor movie or a movie that doesn't feel like Indiana Jones. And I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people said that about Crystal Skull, which I don't know. I always felt like that movie got a bad rap just because it was coming off the tail of Last Crusade.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
coming off of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with this one, I think if you're expecting something similar to that, you'll probably, I don't know if satisfied is the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
you'll come away and have a good understanding of these two movies that are Indiana Jones, but you might not totally get the same feeling you did with the first three.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it's an older Indiana Jones, so you got to kind of expect the unexpected in terms of you're not going to get the whole action sequences you did
Mm-hmm.
from the first three. He's way older, and I do like that they didn't force him into these scenarios that are so unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
could have, like, Helena Shaw really does a lot of the stunts that you would expect Indy to
Mm-hmm.
do in this one.
Yeah.
So I did appreciate that like we didn't get Harrison Ford climbing onto the plane from the
Mm-hmm.
motorbike
Yeah.
in the rain, right? Like that would have
Oh
been
God,
just
yeah. That
so
would have been even
ridiculous.
less believable than Helena
Exactly.
doing it, right?
So yeah, I'm also at the point where it's like I really do hope this is the last one with Harrison Ford. I don't need to
Yeah.
see 90-year-old Harrison Ford in 10 years
Ugh.
coming back. Like it's
Especially, yeah, man. It's just like becoming increasingly impossible to even fathom what the next installment could look like if it's not a
exactly.
reboot.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, kind of touching on the like ranking a little bit, it
Mhm.
feels very much for me like Temple of Doom, Crystal Skull, and Dial of Destiny all kind of have like they each have like a third of each movie that
Mhm.
has its like strong suits. Like
Yep.
Temple of Doom, we get young prime time Harrison Ford and Indiana
Yep.
Jones and the short round
Yep.
dynamic, right? Last Crusade really nails it on the head with that like Spielberg feel and that
Yep.
whimsical style, uh, and some of like even like treasure hunting
Yep.
stuff, and some of the set pieces are great. And then Dial of Destiny also nails some of those like riddle solving, like puzzle solving, treasure hunting indie, and just more great Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones
Yeah.
in that film. So like all of those have their like some highlights,
Yeah.
which like putting them all together would have made like a top
Yeah.
contender, but they're unfortunately all three separate movies, which also
Yeah.
have their own separate like low
Highs
lights
and
and
lows.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, things that are holding them that back from reaching that top tier. Um, and I mean, like when you end on the note that Last Crusade does of riding into the sunset, it's like
Yeah.
how can you possibly even add to this that'll make
Yeah.
it like
Well, I think
that much
that
better?
that's why it took them so long to come back, because like they already ended it perfectly once and then they tried to
Yeah.
end it perfectly two more times after
Yeah.
that. And it's not like it was 2 or 3 years later, it was decades
Right.
later for each one. So like
Exactly.
yeah, it would
It's
have been
wild.
like in alternate history, it would have been cool to go back and see like if they did make, you know, Indiana Jones 4 back in 95, only 6 years later,
Hmm.
it would have been interesting to see how much different it would have been.
Hmm.
But obviously,
Yeah.
we'll never get that with Harrison Ford. I would be
No.
absolutely shocked if we don't get some kind of Indiana Jones in the next 10 years, whether that's, Disney Plus or TV show
Yeah.
or whatever. They keep saying
Yeah.
it's the last Indiana Jones movie, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll believe it when I'm in my grave and
Yeah,
there hasn't been a re-release or whatever.
exactly.
Yeah. And depending on what the release schedule is like for the game, there might be some sort of movie tie-in with that as well. So it could be sooner rather than later. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's like, again, Indiana Jones isn't going anywhere. Like you said, the game is coming out. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can nail that, because we haven't had a great Indiana Jones game in forever. What was the last one? Staff of Kings back in like 2007.
I haven't played any of aside from the Lego ones. I haven't played
really?
any of the Lego the Indiana Jones games. So
yeah, there's a couple good ones.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, Staff of Kings, I remember being so stoked when that game was going to come out, and then it sucked. So we'll see. This next one, I'm super excited to see what they do, and voice acting is another one I'm interested to see, because obviously it's going to be Harrison Ford likeness. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. But maybe they don't use Harrison Ford, and it's just kind of a different Indiana Jones.
Yeah, they'll bring in Tom Holland for this one.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's where we'll wrap it up. I think this is a soft recommendation from both of us.
Yeah, I think if you're an Indiana Jones fan, check it out. It's the last time you're going to see Harrison Ford on the big screen as Indiana Jones. Like, even if you walk out and you hate it, at least you saw it on the big screen, and you said you can say you saw it on the big screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a movie. I think it'll age well. I think people are kind of coming around to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. They may not love it, but I think people are coming around and saying, it's not really as bad as people were saying when it first came out. And I think the same thing's going to happen in 5 years. I think people look back and say, sure, it's not Last Crusade or Raiders, but it's a pretty decent entry into the Indiana Jones franchise.
And hey, if the Star Wars prequels can find an audience years later, then I'm sure this film will as well.
I have no idea how people can honestly say with a straight face that episode 1 and episode 2 are good movies, because those things suck ass. The third one, I like the third one, but those first two, I forced myself to watch the first one, and I haven't gone back to watch the second one, because I'm like, these suck. They're so bad.
Oh man, I can't wait to have you on when we do a Star Wars rewatch on the channel. We'll
just
keep
one
it
more
there.
thing let me give one more thing about Star Wars. There's some good stuff and some bad stuff, but the bad stuff is so bad that it overwhelmingly shadows over the good stuff, that I'm just like, how do you guys, who wants to talk about Trade Confederacy for like 2 movies and think it's good? Sorry, but yeah, those movies stink.
And on that note, that is where we're going to wrap up the No Score Review show for today. Cole, where can the people find you?
Cole Parkinson 4 at, what is that, Instagram and Twitter, I think, both.
And do you have any other recommendations at all other than Dial of Destiny?
I just got Drive on 4K, and I'm super excited to rewatch that movie. I haven't seen it in forever, and I love that movie. So I am probably going to watch that here in the next couple of weeks. And if you haven't seen that one, that is spectacular movie.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree on that one. Cool. You can find me wherever you're listening to or watching this episode of the No Score Review Show. I recently did a review on Asteroid City, Wes Anderson's latest film. And if you haven't checked it out already, me and Cole and Shay, other guest on the show, did a franchise in review, the first franchise in review to the channel for the Indiana Jones franchise overall. That's where we go over the first 4 films and talk about our highlights and lowlights and kind of our history with the franchise overall, how we got into it and everything, what we think of it overall. So definitely go check that out if you want our thoughts on the other Indiana Jones films in more depth. I've also got more reviews coming down the pipeline. We've still got a few big hitters coming this summer.
Yes.
I've stated again and again, Barbenheimer month is upon us.
Yes, sir.
Barbie and Oppenheimer are coming very soon. The first part to the 7th Mission Impossible franchise is coming as well. So there'll be reviews for those movies. We're getting a new Ninja Turtles movie later this summer as well. And we're also getting another DCEU film in Blue Beetle. So we'll see how that is.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, cautious optimism, I guess I would say with that one, just like anything else. if you're into video game Let's Play content, I'll give a quick shout out to my No Score Plays channel. I play mostly indie games, puzzle game type content over there. If you want some chill out, relaxing videos to put on in the background or something. And otherwise, we got some cat cameos.
Yeah, just hanging out. We're just chilling on the couch.
Love it.
Yep.
And otherwise, you can find me on Letterboxd and all the socials at No Score or at No Score Reviews. Thanks again, Cole, for joining me once again on the show. And thank you all so much for listening and watching. Let us know what you thought of Dial of Destiny in the comments below, or you can tweet me on Twitter at No Score Reviews, and we can generate some of that positive, healthy discussion online. And otherwise, we'll see you all in the next review. Bye-bye.
Bye.